So from reviewing your website, I believe you mentioned that the making of the Black Russian was your desire to bring light to the drug problem in northern India that you experienced when you were over there.
Yeah, I was taking a taxi trip up to the northern part of India, and I noticed that my cabbie kept pulling over, and he kept pulling over to the side of the street, and he'd go away and come back, and I had asked him several times, like, well, what are you doing, man? Why do you keep pulling over? And do you have to use the bathroom, or what is it? So he's like, no, I'm just getting my medicine. So then after interviewing him a little bit longer, I found out that he was actually getting opium. And I was like, I asked him, I said, literally, you can like pull over anywhere? You don't have to have like a dealer or a specific spot? He's like, it's pretty prevalent everywhere in North India. So I followed, I traveled with him up into the village areas and up to the cities of northern India. And I found that in most villages, there's a pretty heavy presence of opium dealers or narcotics dealers. And I started asking around. I asked, like, well, what's the percentage, do you think, of addiction here? And I pulled an article, actually, that at some point there was a certain category of men, like I think it was like 17 to 24, where at some point 40% of the population was using opium. So I didn't buy that, because I said 40% of this region is using opium. I said, that's crazy. That means like the civilization is going to collapse. And I found it striking that no one knew about this, and this is happening in the north of India, bordering Pakistan. So I talked to a couple of government officials there, and what they explained to me was that a lot of the drugs come over from Pakistan, and a lot of the terrorist activities are funded by this drug trade. The drugs come in, the money goes out, weapons are bought, and so forth. And this sort of sets up all the weapons trades that happen between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And no one knows about the impact it has on northern India. And I thought to myself, I thought it'd be really cool to bring light to this drug trade, but in the construct of a story or a screenplay I wanted to tell. So it was a sort of a happenstance journey I was taking up there, and I found out about it, and I used this as the backdrop to the Black Russian.
You mentioned that the Indian news media seems to maybe bypass these stories?
Yeah, they tend not to focus on it. I think the media in India is very much driven by what the politicians want the people to look at or view. So I think the politicians have something to do with this drug trade, and this is just a theory or supposition. It's not, I don't know, to be fact, but after talking to several people, it seems like certain politicians are getting richer and others are not. And India being it is a democracy, but it's not the pressing issue. I mean, there's other issues that the media likes to cover there. So it's not something that's really known about, and I just found that odd.
From your time you said you spent some time briefly in Seattle, doing something with psychology and
addiction. My undergrad at University of Washington.
So what parallels do you see? Because is heroin usage is fairly high, isn't it, in the Washington area, or alcohol?
It might be, but I never came across it. I mean, not like in India. Wow. So in India, it was my taxi driver. In Seattle, I was just hanging around with other college kids who perhaps alcohol use was a little high, but I don't know about the other stuff.
Do you see any parallels between how, especially California culture? I mean, there's dispensaries pretty much on most blocks, aside from residential neighborhoods. Do you see any sort of parallels between that, or two different animals?
I think they're two different animals. I think the dispensaries are more, I guess they're more government regulated here in the state, whereas in India it's like a crack dealer. It's like on the corner of the street. It's very shady and there's no I guess quality control is what you would say.